Okay, the live stream has started, and we're going to get going here in just a second. Tom, how are you doing this lovely afternoon?
I am so fine so far. It's not blazingly hot, but it's getting close.
But it's also not afternoon where you are, if that's accurate. Yes,
Yeah, that's true. It's not hot yet.
this is true. So there we go. Has it been 90s in the Oklahoma?
Yeah, it is currently. Let me check my magical watch device. It's 86, but it's supposed to be in the 90s today, and it's supposed to hit 100 next week.
Oh, that sounds hellish. Okay, so let's get started with the Gestalt IT Rundown. Hello, all, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown for the week of May 28th, even though it was Memorial Day. I guess the 29th. There was news on Memorial Day. Hi, my name is Rich Stroffolino, and I am your host here, running down the IT news of the week. I am joined in the hellish landscape of Oklahoma by my good friend, colleague, and indeed, gentleman of leisure, Tom Hollingsworth. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rich. I would like to give a quote by my good friend Red Adair. If I owned a place in hell and a place in Oklahoma, I'd rent out the place in Oklahoma and live in hell.
Tom, your audio is all of a sudden coming through very grainy and like a robot. Is your mic? Can you try and reconnect your mic for a second there?
I'll give that a shot.
And now you have just disappeared, or you're frozen. So this is good. So Tom will be back in just a second. I'm going to take down my name from the little chyrons here, and we're going to get started. We got a lot of news, some of it dealing with some policy stuff, some vaguely political stories, but we're going to try and focus on the tech angle for IT practitioners. I think we're going to jump in here and get started talking about potential U.S. ZTE settlement. The New York Times and Reuters are now reporting that the Trump administration told Congress it reached an agreement with ZTE, which currently has a 7-year ban against U.S. companies supplying parts to the company. ZTE will reportedly pay a penalty. I've seen $1.3 billion floated around, shuffle its management, and hire American compliance officers. One of the things against them is supposedly they were supplying components to regimes that the U.S. had trade embargoes against, such as Iran, I believe. In return, the U.S. would drop the current ban, which is effectively not allowing ZTE to do business. President Trump has called the ZTE negotiations part of broader talks to address alleged Chinese trade abuses. Now, Tom, thanks for rejoining us, by the way. Appreciate that. One of the interesting things about this is this kind of brought up that I did not realize how big of a place in the U.S. market ZTE had. This current ban is basically means they can't do any business in the U.S. or makes it very hard to do any business with any kind of profitability. But I believe they're the number 3 handset shipper in the United States and have kind of reaches all across telecoms. Do these kind of sanctions alleviate any concerns, or for consumers is this just a political argument? This isn't necessarily something they really care about one way or the other.
This is mostly a political argument. Most people don't care in the long run, as long as they can go buy a cheap Android handset, because that's really what ZTE made. Now, the biggest question that I haven't heard addressed with this yet, yeah, we're going to let ZTE have some capability to manufacture in the U.S. again or to sell into the U.S. But there was a huge national security concern just before the embargo was announced. Several sitting U.S. senators and congressmen think that there is a national security risk of having ZTE devices that phone home that could be, sending secret information back to China. So I think whatever happens, that's going to have to be addressed as well. And maybe ZTE has to kind of open things up a little bit and let regulators in there and see what's going on. I know that's been one of the arguments for against Huawei for years, is that there's a possibility of some back doors that people aren't aware of.
It's very interesting that they don't seem that concern hasn't been raised as much as I've heard, rather than it's these, it's how they're behaving as a company versus security concerns. Now, maybe that's because they don't have quite the presence. They're not trying to get into the data center so much as Huawei, which is, I think, why, we don't want Huawei access points. We don't want, Huawei servers necessarily. And if they're going to be phoning home, handsets are a slightly different concern. But yeah, I think for consumers, a lot of this is for your unbranded, carrier branded $50 no contract cell phone. But definitely broader security concerns as well. So I'll be interested to see if that works out. Tom, kind of going back to some of our more greatest hits, Qualcomm, they're trying to buy things, and it looks like they may actually be successful. The Wall Street Journal reports that the Chinese State Administration for Market Regulation, They have a way with names. Is set to approve Qualcomm's $44 billion acquisition of NXP Semiconductor. The approval is expected to include conditions to favor domestic Chinese businesses, surprise, surprise, particularly around mobile payment technology. Qualcomm previously received approval on the deal from 8 other global antitrust regulators. China has requested that Qualcomm kind of reset their bid on this a couple of times, but it looks like now they've lined up all their ducks. They've done what they've needed to do to assure China that they're not going to edge out local business. I mean, the big concern that I've been seeing across is that NXP would give them a considerable portfolio in kind of mobile payment, mobile transaction technology, and China wants to make sure that their local businesses aren't going to be affected by that. So Qualcomm gets to buy something. Yay.
Yeah. Well, Qualcomm had to get bigger to start fending off because they've proven they're vulnerable after the Broadcom attempted acquisition, which, let's face it, didn't fail for monetary reasons. It failed for political ones. This is basically to fend off the next suitor, if you will. And Qualcomm's got to go on a buying spree. They've got to start integrating and streamlining that technology and making everything work, because if they don't, they're going to find themselves broken apart and sold off piece by some, hot shot activist investor like Carl Icahn or Elliott Capital Management.
Yeah, and loaded up with debt and then dead in 5 years. One of the interesting things, and this will relate to a story we're going to be talking about later, is I wonder if Qualcomm, there's a lot of companies, there's a lot of talk that FPGAs are about to kind of enter into their own in the whole AI ML landscape. I'm wondering if maybe one of the big FPGA makers might be a target for a Qualcomm acquisition as well along those lines. Again, they just have to get bigger, sell more things, make the money.
Yeah, exactly. The FPGA market is going to be huge before you know it.
Yeah. All right. So in security news, Cisco's Talos security team reported that a Russian malware attack known as VPNFilter had infected over 500,000 consumer-grade routers and NAS devices. Yes, they're coming for your network-attached storage. The Daily Beast reports that the FBI has seized a domain associated with the malware and would be used to deliver future stages of it. So basically, it comes in 3 stages. The first stage is basically the platform to deliver further exploits. And this URL would have been called to for some of the second stages and third stages, which would allow them to monitor communication, shut down your device, that kind of stuff. The FBI basically is recommending that anyone with a consumer grade router reset their router. I think Linksys Tom, what's the other big router manufacturer? I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Linksys, Microtic had a couple. QNAP had a couple of devices. They're all based on the same reference architecture, which is why they were able to get infested as easily as they were.
Yeah, and basically, what they're saying is, so a reset will the stage 2 and 3 versions of this exploit don't survive a reboot. So you're good there, and the first stage is kind of useless unless they can get to those other 2 stages, and then a hard reset will wipe it entirely. And the FBI is now working with ISPs to disseminate infected IP addresses, let people know if they're broadcasting and kind of being a bad actor, letting them know, hey, do that hard reset and reset your SSID. Seems like a pretty sophisticated exploit. Like you said, a wide range of, and also like a long-term game here. I think the biggest story, though, is kind of a win for Cisco's Talos security. I've seen a number of news stories coming out lately that they've really being, you could argue that maybe that's not, I mean, it's certainly in Cisco's interest to secure their own stuff, but I didn't see any Cisco name on any of that hardware, and, build some goodwill for Cisco and builds a safer internet, I guess, for them to operate on.
Yeah, Talos has been knocking it out of the park with all of the detections that they've had recently. As a matter of fact, if you really want to see the nuts and bolts behind this thing, go read the Talos blog article that they put up. Yeah, you're right. Cisco had no infected devices. There were only 2 low-end Linksys routers that were affected by this, and those were both produced after Cisco sold Linksys off to the Belkin Group. This thing was nasty. As Rich mentioned, it had some command and control URLs. It had 3 stages of backup to try to infect other devices if those URLs went offline. It used EXIF data from online pictures to determine ways to spread. It was the movie poster for What Women Want with Mel Gibson. So go figure, right?
Yeah, and I do enjoy, when you see this level of sophistication that, this isn't, a bunch of hackers putting this together and thinking like, hey, this would be fun if we distribute this out there. Clearly, either a large organization or state sponsored, and I think it was later come out that confirmed that this was associated from Russian sources. So interesting article there. Hey, Tom, are you a fan of Obvious Things?
Oh, yeah.
Well, a new report from Platformonomics, say that 3 times fast, looks at CAPEX spending from IBM and Oracle, and hey, guess what? They're in trouble. From an IBM perspective, CAPEX is actually down for cloud spending over the course of the last several years, both in terms of absolute dollars spent as well as a percentage of revenue. Now, it's still around like $4 billion, so it's not an inconsiderable amount of money, but considering, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google are in, double digits there, it's definitely a lower number. And the fact that it's decreasing, certainly not a great sign. We're talking about Oracle. They've actually doubled their CAPEX since 2014 as kind of part of their broader cloud strategy and have increased the percentage of revenue going into cloud CAPEX. So, definitely making some steps. But in terms of absolute dollars, they're less than anybody. I think they're just under $2 billion in terms of total cloud CAPEX. It's estimated that they've spent a cumulative total and they've been counting since 2001 of about $3.5 billion on cloud CAPEX, which is about what one of the big three spend per quarter. So think about that. Growth of their cloud business also trails Google, Amazon, and Microsoft when you're looking at quarterly revenue growth. They're growing at a healthy rate, 25, 30%, but Amazon's growing at like 40%. The big issue here is the reason Oracle's kind of figured out, hey, cloud is important, is it's going to eventually eat into their business. IBM's kind of in the same boat. They've been turning the battleship in some direction that no one seems quite sure about yet. But, kind of what's the next step for these two companies in terms of their cloud play? I mean, clearly they can't keep up on the CAPEX numbers. Is it just to, in Oracle's case, keeps, increasing the percentage of revenue that goes toward it and find your niche and build your business off of that? Is that the only way to succeed, Tom?
Pretty much. I'm pretty sure we're going to find out that the cloud spending number is actually Larry Ellison's secret volcano layer in the Pacific. No, IBM has proven that they're probably making the smart move by reducing CAPEX spending until they can get more cloud revenue, cloud customers. I think they are fighting a very losing battle here. They're eventually going to have to partner up, sell their assets off to somebody else, maybe a Google, and then just, do what IBM did 10 years ago, give up and start fresh again. Because let's face it, that's what IBM is good at now, is realizing that they probably should cut their losses and move on. Well, hey, I used to run a Blue Lightning chip with OS2 Warp. Let's face it, IBM of old did not know when to quit while they were ahead. Now, Oracle, on the other hand, they're doubling down when they should probably stop. And you are the 5th horse in a 3-horse race at this point. Don't. But they have to show that they are selling cloud, and they have to show that they are becoming a leader in cloud. And when you can't even beat an organization's cloud hobby kit, I don't care how much money you're going to throw at it. And let's be fair. You're probably throwing a lot of money for Oracle at it, but you're not throwing enough money at it to topple a large cloud provider. If you want to really get serious, you need to stop adding cloud capacity whenever you sell cloud. You need to add cloud capacity to sell cloud.
All right. Well, any of those public cloud providers might be interested in this next story. Originally developed to standardize high-end graphics for servers, NVIDIA just unveiled an update to their HGX cloud server infrastructure, creatively titled, get ready for it, HGX 2. This will provide supercomputers and hyperscale cloud players 16 NVIDIA V100 GPUs connected over the NVLink fabric into one logical pool capable of hitting 2 petaflops or training an AI on 15,500 images per second, at least according to some benchmark, which I'm sure is in some sort of optimized scenario. NVIDIA's DGX2 will be the first system to use the updated architecture and is available for a mere $399,000. So silly money. Microsoft, Facebook, AWS, Lenovo, and a bunch of other players all have designs either in the works or already in production based on this architecture. Basically, this lets you slot in in a whole bunch of GPU to kind of a standard server architecture. They compared it kind of to the ATX standard that was pushed for desktop computers, letting you very easily slot things in and out. GPU definitely in vogue here, and I feel like we're going to be seeing, this is kind of the cool, like exciting, NVIDIA's putting out these, 2 petaflops is an insane number. I feel like NVIDIA just has to keep this because we're going to be seeing those ASICs FPGAs, slowly starting to, I think, add on at first. I think they're going to be, AI is already a super specialized workload. We're going to be seeing those in like extremely specific AI workloads, and only, over the course of a couple of years kind of build out and maybe into more general use. I hesitate to even use that term, but NVIDIA is ahead in this horse race, but they can't let up on the throttle at this point, even though horses don't have throttles.
They kind of do. No, I recorded a podcast about a month ago with Gina Rosenthal from VMware and the folks over at Tech Unplugged, and GPUs and HPC are huge. VMware, the latest release of vSphere, I believe it's 6.7, has a lot of GPU virtualization support built into it, and there's a reason for that. When you look at AI, when you look at ML, when you look at HPC, GPUs are king. CPUs get the box booted. GPUs do the heavy lifting. People are not writing AI ML programming for regular general purpose CPUs. I mean, $399,000, man, if I could only mine about 7 Bitcoins, I could pay for that thing. All right. But the reality is that that's the kind of heavy lifting hardware that you're going to see going forward, and to be able to put it into a form factor that allows it to be paravirtualized across, a variety of systems, or even, almost like a composable infrastructure thing. This is a cloud play, plain and simple. And cloud providers are going to snatch a few of these things up because they can make bank off of it by selling it to their customers.
Well, and if you're interested in that podcast, it just published on the On-Premise IT Roundtable podcast feed yesterday. So you can check that out at gestaltit.com/podcast. But no, you're absolutely right, Tom. And I think this is the other side. This is more of the hyperscale play to what we've been seeing with a couple companies doing with composable infrastructure. Kind of the opposite side of it, though. This is grouping together a huge amount of GPUs, letting them basically, they're able to, GPU to GPU at like 300 gigabits per second or something insane like that. We're seeing a lot of companies, maybe more for more enterprise use cases, do PCI switches on top of your rack, able to kind of add and swap GPUs, using PCIe. So very interesting. And obviously, like I said, NVIDIA's in the lead here. They want to be setting the standards, getting people used to using their stuff, and, hopefully staying relevant in this highly, highly, highly profitable space.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Tom, and finally, a story I'm particularly excited about. The Vermont legislature passed a bill becoming the first state in the U.S. to require data brokers to register with the state. The bill also requires data brokers to secure data and notify victims of breaches, as well as classifying criminal use of data as fraud. The law defines a data broker as any company that collects and sells personal information to third parties collected from consumers without a direct relationship. Now, obviously, this is well short of anything like GDPR. First of all, it's limited to Vermont, America's winter playground, if I'm not mistaken. But it does seem to be the first U.S. recognition that data belongs to people and that it has some value, and maybe we should protect it. Any hope that this will change the conversation in the U.S.? I know. I feel like GDPR is leaving a bad taste in people's mouths just because they've gotten a lot of seemingly spam emails about terms of service updating. But this seems like an important step. Is Vermont the bellwether here, Tom?
Well, I think the most important thing that we need to think about here, Rich, is that I have updated my privacy policy and would like to inform you about it. Oh. No, I'm kidding. This is a good step. One of the reasons why GDPR works is because the EU basically is a giant continent-sized hammer that can lower it down on companies and say, no, you're going to behave like this. In the US, we don't have that. We have 50 small little rock hammers that have to chip away at the monolith that is Facebook and data brokers. And I think it's funny, GDPR took effect last Friday, and it's amusing to me the number of services that had to shut down because they couldn't be compliant. I just read a story today. Twitter is blocking anyone whose birthday indicates that they were a user of the service before they were 13 because, hey, we don't know if they were, able to accept GDPR. I don't think we're ever going to get to GDPR. The difference between the EU and the US is, about a metric crap ton of lobbyists that won't allow it to happen. But I'm happy to see that certain states are starting to kind of push this idea that, yeah, it's really important that people need to have their data protected and not just sold to 1,500 other entities. And the next thing you know, you're getting terms of service updates from a company you've never had contact with, have never heard of. And when you do the research, you find out it was the fourth in line of a string of acquisitions of a service you signed up for once 6 years ago.
Well, the one good thing is that, yeah, while this technically only affects a small number of Americans, theoretically, all it takes is, a few more states to put something like this into law where it becomes in a company's financial interest. If California passes this law, it effectively becomes national data protection law, because if you have to update it for the however many millions of people in California, you might as well do it across the board. Now, obviously, that doesn't give you any recourse, when the next Yahoo or Verizon data breach comes across and 10 billion email addresses are leaked and, you just got hacked. It would be nice if your particular state had, some kind of fraud or, had some kind of protections to say, hey, we have to notify you or something like that. But again, if they already have those systems in place for some states, it seems like it would be harder to not implement them for all of their customers. An interesting first step. Like you said, there are some policy implementations. I mean, I don't think we're anywhere close to having any kind of national will to do this across the board. I personally don't think this is a partisan issue to say that data has value and that people that you didn't say to have your data. I mean, I would think with the whole, right, it was Equifax, the big Equifax hack, right? You would think with that, there was a bad enough taste in people's mouths to maybe move some legislation like that in this weird area of business to business data transactions, right? Sadly, doesn't seem to be the case, but hey, Vermont, nice step. Thank you. And Vermont, they're the state that makes New Hampshire nervous. So that just about does it for the Gestalt IT Rundown for this week. Tom, thank you so much. Where can people find your great work if they are so
As always, check out my Twitter, Networking Nerd. The snark is flowing freely this summer because it's hot and everything's flowing freely. Blog is networkingnerd.net. Yeah, and there's a link there to see the other writing that I do, including all of the articles that I've published on gestaltit.com.
Tom, I don't want to think about anything about you that's flowing freely. You can find my work at gestaltit.com as well, or on Twitter, Mr. Anthropology, MR Anthropology, for all observations, whimsical, technological, or otherwise. Until next time we meet, Wednesday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We're live on Facebook. We publish it on YouTube and gestaltit.com. Remember, everybody, have a super sparkly day.